Hello everyone! In this lesson, we are going to set up a new feature so that subscriber accounts can like or heart a professor. It's a bit difficult to explain with words, so let me show you. Okay, so here I am on the home page, but I want to navigate to a professor detail screen. So you can either jump to a professor by navigating through the programs, or just press the S key on your keyboard, and I'm going to search for Professor Barks-a-Lot. Cool, there it is. Let me visit the detail screen for that professor. Okay, and what I want to do is right about here, I want to add a little box with a heart icon and then a number, indicating how many likes a professor has received. And I want to set things up so that you need to be logged in with a subscriber account in order to add your like to the count. Okay, and we will also implement custom logic so that each user account can only add one like, but they can click the heart button again to toggle or remove their original like. All right, and we can display the total number of likes that a professor has received to the general public. The reason we are going to work on this feature is because I think it's a great exercise to learn how to set up your own custom REST API endpoints. Okay, but anyways, let's begin with the visual aspect. So right now, let's go edit the single professor template so that the little heart box can sit right here. So over in our text editor, within our theme folder, I want you to open up single-professor.php. Okay, and I want you to find the PHP block where we are outputting the content. So for me, it's sitting within the div with a class of 2/3, right? That's this area. Okay, and right above this PHP block, let's add a new line and let's create a span element. And let's give the opening tag a class of like-box. And then within the span, I'm going to drop down and add several more elements. So first, let's add a heart icon. So an I element, and let's give it a class of FA for font awesome, which is our icon library. Let's give it a secondary class of FA-heart-O. And let's also add another attribute named aria-hidden and set it to true. Okay, and this will give us a hollow or outlined heart icon. And then right below this element, I want to add another icon of a filled in heart. So just duplicate this I element, copy and paste. And for the second one, just remove the -O on the secondary class. So simply FA-heart. Okay, then below this icon, let's create another span. And let's just make up a fictitious number of how many likes it's received. I will say 3. And let's give this element a class of like-count. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And if we refresh, cool, there we see the little heart box. And if the current user has already liked the professor they're viewing, instead of a hollow outline of a heart, it would be a solid filled in heart. Don't worry, we will set up that detail a bit later on. Okay, so now that we've taken care of the visual aspect of this feature, let's focus on the data aspect, right? The question becomes, how are we going to save these likes into the WordPress database? Well, there are a lot of different ways you could do this, but I'm just going to create a new custom post type and give it a name of like. And each individual like post will represent a one-to-one relationship between the ID number of the current user and the ID number of the liked professor. So without any further ado, let's go create a brand new custom post type. We've been through this before, we know what to do. So over in the text editor, instead of our theme folder, let's jump into the MU must use plugins folder. And we've got this file where we register our custom post types. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. And I'm just going to use the note post type as a copy and paste duplicate. So copy that, duplicate it. Let's change the comment to say like post type. Change the short name or variable name to like. Okay, and now here's the important part of what's making this feature unique from the My Notes feature. This ability to like professors is going to require us to implement quite a bit of custom logic, right? Each user can only like a professor once, and we will also want to make sure that the ID that they say they are liking is actually a professor post and not a campus post or a blog post. So long story short, what I'm getting at here is this is not just a simple case of CRUD, right? Of create, read, update, and delete. That's a part of it, yes, but there's also going to be a bit of custom logic that we need to enforce. And when that's the case, when you need to implement your own custom restrictions and logic, I don't like to use the built-in REST API endpoints. Instead, I like to create my own brand new custom endpoints. And I also like to take care of permissions manually by myself. So for this new like post type, I'm going to delete the show in REST line. You could set this to false, but that's not necessary because it defaults to false. So if we just delete show in REST, all right, and also we do not need capability type or map meta cap because we are going to handle permissions on our own when it comes to the like post type. So I'm going to delete these two lines. Okay, moving on. When it comes to the supports array, we do not need the editor feature. We literally just need title. Let's keep public set to false. And let's keep show UI set to true. Then let's go ahead and update the label values. So to save some typing, I'm just going to highlight the base of the word, not notes, but just note. And then I can press Command or Control D to select the next few instances. And then just type the word like once and it updates in all locations. You don't need to do that, but it's a nice little trick if you're using Sublime Text or Atom. Okay, and finally let's update the menu icon to -icons -heart. Okay, now let's go ahead and save this, and then let's jump to a window where we are logged in as the admin account, and jump into the dashboard. And if you refresh, now in the sidebar we have likes. Now in the future, once we've written all of the necessary PHP and JavaScript, you will be able to come to a professor page, and when you click on the heart box, that will create a like post. Now obviously we have not written all of that PHP and JavaScript yet, so for the moment let's cheat and let's use the back end to manually create a like post, just as a test. So in the admin, hover over likes and click add new. Now there are a lot of different ways we could set this up. I'm going to set things up so that whoever is the author of a like post represents the user that's doing the liking. And then I want there to be a custom field named liked professor ID. And obviously that custom field will store the ID number of the current professor that you're trying to like. So for example, whatever the ID of Dr. Barks-a-Lot is. Okay, so at the moment, our like post does not have a custom field named liked professor ID, so why don't we go create one? So towards the bottom of our sidebar, let's click on custom fields. And I'm going to create a new group here up at the top, add new. I will name it liked professor ID. And then I need one field, so I will click add field. Give it a label, liked professor ID. That auto-generates this name. And for the field type, instead of text, I will choose number. The field type is not super important. This will just provide one extra layer of validation. All right, for required, I want to be sure to leave it set to no, because later on, when we learn how to programmatically create a new post with PHP, when a new like post is first created, for a split second, it will not contain a liked professor ID. So be sure that required is set to no, and then let's scroll down to this location box, and let's say only show this field group if post type is equal to, and let's choose like. Okay, then we can scroll up and click publish. Okay, and let's go take this new custom field for a test drive. Let's create a like post. So over in the sidebar under likes, I will click add new. Cool, and there we see it, liked professor ID. So I'm going to pretend that I like the Dr. Barks a Lot professor, so I would need to go find the ID for this professor post. Don't worry, the visitors of our website will not need to do that. This is just our first little quick test that we are setting up manually. So let's go find the ID number for Dr. Barks a Lot, or in your case, find the ID of whatever professor you want to add a like for. Back in the admin, if I jump to professors really quick and click on Dr. Barks a Lot, I can see up in the address bar that that professor post has an ID of 104. So in your case, take note of whatever professor ID you want to like. Okay, and now with this number in mind, let's go actually create a like post. Okay, so the title of the like post does not matter. You can even leave it blank, and WordPress will generate something for us automatically. The important part is for liked professor ID, I will say 104, and that's all we need. So then I will click Publish. And now at this point, let's work on making our front end display real data, right? So instead of the number 3 here, the Dr. Barks a Lot like box should say 1, and all of the other professor pages should say 0. We want this number to reflect the count of relevant like posts. So to set that up, let's jump back into our text editor, and instead of our MU plugins folder, let's jump to the theme folder, and we should already have open singleprofessor.php. And let's do this. How about right above the span with a class of like box, right above that, let's add a new line, and let's drop into PHP. And within the PHP block, let's create a new variable. We could name it whatever we want. I'm going to name it like count, and let's set it to equal a new instance of the WP query class. All right, within these parentheses, let's build out an array that describes the exact posts that we are looking for. So let's say post type and set it to like, and then let's add a comma and add a new line, and let's say meta query. We need to use a meta query because we only want to pull in like posts where the liked professor ID value matches the ID of the current professor page that you're viewing. So to do that, let's set our meta query argument to equal an array, and within the parentheses drop down. And remember that the meta query is actually an array of arrays. Each inner array is a filter, and you can have multiple. So within the array, we'll create an inner array. Drop down, and now within this inner array, let me scroll down a little bit. This is where we provide 3 things. A key, as a placeholder, I will set it to equal X. The second thing we provide is how we want to compare, and the third is the value. Now let's fill these out one by one. So the key is the name of the custom field. Remember, we named ours liked professor ID. For the compare operator, we are looking for an exact match. So we can say single quote equal single quote, right? We're looking for instances where this equals, and then for value, it would be the ID of the current professor that you're viewing. So we can just say get the ID. And that's all we need. So now we have this query object named like count. So now, however many total posts this query finds, we just want to output that number into the HTML right here. So within our PHP file, let's scroll down a little bit. Here's the like box span, and here's the inner span where we currently hard-coded the number 3. Let's delete that and instead drop into PHP, and let's just echo out the name of our query object, which is like count, and then we want to look inside that object with dash greater than, and we're interested in the property named found_posts. This will give us the total number of posts that the query found, and thankfully this property ignores pagination. So even if we set posts per page to 1 or 2 or 3, This property doesn't care. It's going to give you the absolute total number of posts that match the query. Okay, so with this in place, let's save and then refresh the front end. Perfect, and we see 1, which represents that one like post that we manually created. And if we visit another professor, so if I search for Meowsalot and visit their page, perfect, we see 0. Next, let's set things up so that if the current user has already liked the current professor that they're viewing, then the heart should be solid and filled in instead of a hollow outline. Now, before we write PHP to check if that is the case or not, let's first review the CSS that I've already written for us. So for example, if I right-click on the like box and choose Inspect, here is the overall span with a class of like box, and if I give this opening span a data attribute of data-exists, and if I give that a value of yes, as soon as I push enter to confirm that change, watch the heart. It fills up. But if data-exists is set to anything other than yes, then the heart becomes empty. Okay, so we've already got CSS in place that is watching for data-exists equals yes. So now all we need to do is write PHP that outputs data-exists equals either yes or no. So let's jump back into our PHP file and let's do this. Let's use this query that we just wrote named like count. Let's use it as a template in order to save a bunch of typing. So I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard and duplicate it. Okay, and on this duplicate copy, I'm going to change the variable name to exist query. The name doesn't matter, choose whatever you want. And I'm just going to add one key option to this array. So maybe before the post type equals like, let's add a new line. And let's say that the author needs to equal whatever user is currently viewing the page. So get current user ID. Be sure to include a comma at the end of the line. Okay, so this query object will only contain results if the current user has already liked the current professor. So why don't we do this? Right above this new query, let's create a new variable, and I will name it exist status. The name doesn't matter. And by default, I will set its value to no. Okay, then right below this new custom query, let's say if parentheses, curly brackets, and for the condition, let's say if exist query, look inside it for found posts, and as long as it's greater than 0, this will evaluate to true. And if it is true, then let's set this variable to equal yes. So exist status equals yes. Cool, so now we've got this variable that will equal yes or no. And now, down within the HTML for the like box, on the overall opening span tag, let's just say data-exists equals, and then drop into PHP, and just echo out the contents of our exist status variable. All right, now if we go ahead and save that and refresh the page, it makes sense that the heart is hollow on the Dr. Meowsalot page because I haven't liked this professor yet, but if I jump back to the Barksalot page, and you might need to refresh to clear your browser's immediate cache, but cool, there we see that the heart is filled in. And that's going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we will work on JavaScript so that when you click on the like box, we send out a request to a custom REST API endpoint to either create a new like post if you haven't already liked the professor, or if you have already liked the current professor, if you click on the box, we would interpret that as a request to remove your like, in which case we would delete the relevant like post. Should be a lot of fun to set up, so let's keep things rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.